Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... Before I get started on my book review, I just wanted to let everyone know that I'm going to take a small hiatus, and for no one to be worried, everything's going to be fine, but I'm probably going to return the first weekend after Thanksgiving. If not that weekend, then it will be the following weekend. And the reason why this is happening is because on November 16th, I'm getting married and then I'm going on my honeymoon. And I promise you that book reviews are probably going to be the last thing on my mind. But I will be listening to some audiobooks, so I'll just kind of save those in my mind for future reviews. But moving on to this weekend's book review. Now, the reason why I selected the title that I have is because I went online to my social media and I asked my followers exactly what subject they would like for me to review next. And I gave them the option to pick between sci-fi, horror, and paranormal. And at first, the sci-fi genre was going pretty hard, and then the paranormal fandom jumped in, and paranormal is what won the day. So I decided that I wanted to do a book review on a story about a haunted house. But I wanted to pick something that was unique and something that a lot of people might not have heard of, or maybe they've heard of it, but they just have never given it a chance. So I decided to choose The Damned by Algernon Blackwood. And what's so unique about this book is it provides a haunted house that is not technically haunted by a ghost. Since I don't have a print copy of this, I'm just going to reference the ebook version here. And this is going to be a mega pack collection, which also has the story The Wendigo in it. And if you would like a book review on The Wendigo, just reference my videos because I did a book review on that in September, I believe. But with The Damned, it was written in 1914, and it features the protagonist named Bill, who has a sister named Frances, and Frances is friends with a lady named Mabel, who has recently become a widow and has inherited a gothic estate known as the Towers. Now, Mabel writes Frances and says that she would enjoy her company there, and of course Frances accepts and goes to the Towers, but about a week later, Frances writes Bill and invites him to come join them because she says the whole vibe of the Towers has changed. It's a nice place now. There's no brooding vibe to it. And also, Mabel has returned to the person that she was before she met Sam, which Sam is her deceased husband. And by the way, Sam was like this overbearing, pompous preacher. So there was definitely a lot of negativity there. And anyway, Sam is the kind of individual who has a strong personality from what I can gather. And that does play into the book later on. But Bill decides to accept the invitation, and even though the letter is just full of positivity, Bill can't help but feel that the women are too scared to be there alone. So he shows up at the Towers, and shortly after being there, he discovers that Frances has been suffering from anxiety and maybe even some sadness. And the thing is, Mabel just goes into these crying fits for no reason. Well, as the story progresses, there is some brooding vibe that just bears down on the mansion. And it becomes so overbearing that it feels like something could happen at any moment because there's just such a great negativity saturated within its walls. And of course, this ends up affecting the siblings, where you have Bill who begins writing, and it begins as just kind of a hobby or whatnot, but then it turns into what I believe is automatic writing. And then with Frances, she's doing watercolor, and the watercolor eventually turns over into automatic painting. And of course, everything that they write or paint, Mabel wants to see immediately. And so there's something going on here that Mabel is aware of, and she's not giving them the full story. But soon the siblings learn that some haunted houses don't have to have a ghost in them to be haunted. People have said this book is a ghost story without a ghost, and that is fairly accurate. Nonetheless, this is still a book about a haunted house, except the haunting is actually residual. And if you're wondering exactly what a residual haunting is, hopefully this will shine some light on the subject. With residual hauntings, an actual spirit is not present. Instead, a residual haunting is where past actions have become imprinted on a location. Hauntings like this can produce manifestations that can be detected by sight, sound, or smell among the living. And since residual hauntings are like being a bystander as a rerun plays out, there is no form of communication that can be achieved. The reason being is because there is not an actual spirit present to interact with. Residual hauntings can also be places where past emotion has become imprinted on that location, which in turn makes locations such as these a sponge for energy. May that energy be negative, positive, or both. Again, hauntings such as these won't allow an actual interaction, but for those who are in tune with their sixth sense, they may be able to feel emotional energies. There has been a theory developed in regards to residual hauntings, which is called the stone tape theory, which this belief suggests it's the stone from which a location is built or the bedrock of that location that has harvested the energy of those who once lived and died there. Specific stones include quartz and limestone. It is theorized a person can experience what the stones have absorbed, such as sights, sounds, and emotions of the past. Fun facts. Even though this is primarily about Algernon Blackwood, the group that he was involved with actually name dropped some authors who I plan to review in the future, so I hope you enjoyed this upcoming sneak peek of a few names who will definitely be featured on upcoming videos. Algernon Blackwood was a member of the Ghost Club, which originated among scholars at Trinity College in England. Here, club members would gather and discuss the paranormal, but it wasn't until the early 1860s when the club officially formed. Among them, they shared a common goal, which was to debunk paranormal activity and to expose the frauds who capitalized on the spiritualist movement. Other members included within this group were Charles Dickens, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Arthur Machen, and many more. With that out of the way, it's now time to move on to the spoiler section of this video. And this is going to be where I discuss some scenes and character development that could ruin the experience for you if you've never read this book before. So if you would like to skip this section by, just scroll down to the comment section of this video and you'll notice a pinned comment that has a timestamp in it. And if you were to click that timestamp, it would redirect you to the thoughts section of this video. Now, in order to do this, you only have 17 seconds to click away. So, ready, set, go. Now that everyone has had a chance to click away, there's one scene in particular that I would like to bring to everyone's attention. But to get to this scene, I want to give just a little backstory. Now, as I had mentioned, this book is a haunted house story without a ghost. And because of this, we're focusing on nothing but residual energy that Sam has left behind after his death, and this energy has become imprinted on the towers. Now, there are many times in this book where the protagonist even mentions it feels like something's there, but nothing ever happens. And there's even times where he spells it out, nothing happens. But at the same time, the energy and the tensions within this house are so great that it feels like any moment it's just going to explode and all hell is going to break loose, but it never really does. It's kind of like when you have an argument with someone and the argument is dropped, no one apologizes, there's no like resolvement of anything, and you're stuck in the same room with them. And you're stuck there in that thought of just knowing that this is how they feel, this is how you feel, and there's not going to be an agreement that you come to. It's that tension. And so I really applaud the author for being able to take these emotions and put it in a actual building rather than two persons. Now, that's on a supernatural sense of how Sam has affected things. In a natural sense, and this is coming to the scene that I am wanting to discuss, it shows how he has influenced the living. And in this particular scene, you have where Bill is in the towers and he's looking outside through one of the windows. And he sees a few of the children who belong to the servants outside. It's 2 boys and 1 girl. Now, these 2 boys have taken the girl and tied her to a tree with the intent to burn her alive because she has a different belief system than what they do. And of course, Bill saves the day. She doesn't get burned alive or anything. And as I had mentioned, when I read this the first time, it was as a surface read. So I read the scene, continued on, that was it. The second time I read the book, I read it and I focused on it a great deal more. And that's when I discovered how important this scene is. Because the thing is, you notice how Sam has groomed these 2 boys into having the same toxic religious philosophies as himself. And so I don't know if he had specifically told them to physically harm individuals who believe differently than them, or if that's just something they had grabbed out of his preachings. It's never really said. But the thing is, if he can groom 2 children into creating this kind of crime, then I tend to think, what kind of abuse did he give to his wife? What kind of abuse did he give to his servants? How did he manipulate his congregation? And so it really opens up a whole new level here of exactly how sick and twisted this individual was with his fire and brimstone philosophies. I mean, earlier in the book, it does note that Francis says Mabel has returned to her old self. And so by how Mabel is acting now, even though she's still a little uptight, she seems like maybe she could have been more uptight when Sam was alive. And the thing is, she has a right to be uptight at this point, because if she's been living the last few years of her life under the oppressive thumb of a fire and brimstone preacher, of course she should feel like she's still walking on eggshells. So my question is, exactly how far did the abuse go with her and the servants and everyone else? Did it become physical? Did it even become sexual? Who knows? But it really allows the imagination to expand here. And a lot of what I gained from that scene, and a lot of what I've gained from reading about Sam's personality throughout, it really hit home in a few different ways, because it's like, it's almost too real. In this segment, I would like to speak about Mabel, and even though she's not a main character of the book, she is the main reason why Francis and Bill went to the towers to start with. And even though Blackwood doesn't give her this great big background story, he does provide us enough information where the reader can either empathize or sympathize with her, or just imagine the hell that she's been through with Sam. Now, the first thing I want to touch on is the age gap between her and Sam. And even though I don't believe an age gap in a relationship is a problem unless one of the people in that relationship is underage, and then it is a total problem. But as long as both people are of legal age and consent, no issue. But I tend to think that in this circumstance, and it really doesn't elaborate, I tend to think that maybe Mabel was a little closer to like age 15 or 16 when she first got with Sam. And I think he totally used this to his benefit. Now, the thing is, I think she was naive and I think she was gullible. And with Sam, he comes into her life and presents himself as an older, established, wealthy man who is also a preacher that the public absolutely adores. And so these are elements that people at that age and time would believe was the perfect ingredients to the perfect man. And I think that maybe Sam had preyed on younger women because maybe people his own age or older just would not put up with his bullshit, or they would totally see the red flags and haul ass. So I think that this was definitely a predatorial relationship on his behalf. Now, what comes next is marriage. And what happens with the marriage is you have Mabel, who has to adapt her life to Sam's way of living. This means she has to adapt her philosophies and religion to match his. And it doesn't ever indicate that there's any physical abuse here, but it does definitely show some mental abuse. And it also shows that because of her having to change exactly who she was, it could be that there was people in her old life that she had to completely dismiss. And maybe I'm reading too much into this, but the reason why I feel this way is at the beginning of the book, you have Frances who tells Bill, well, Mabel has returned to her good old self, meaning that she's reverted back to how she used to be before she got with this jackass. Now, the thing is, what comes with that subject is if you are in a bad place or a negative place, maybe you're a drug addict or an alcoholic, yeah, you should be with a spouse who wants to change you for the better. You don't want to be with a spouse where you are already not broken, you are already good, and you have this individual who wants to take that, dismiss it all, and completely change you into what they see would be appropriate for a lover. And the thing is, Sam doesn't only twist her mind in this sense, he does it to the children of the servants who live at the towers. And this is seen in that description that I gave in the spoiler section here. And it's just this sick and twisted portrait of how a good Christian man can be a complete con artist and use religion to his benefit to create just nothing but horrible crap. And I say horrible crap because, I mean, hell, how much worse can you get than two kids getting ready to light another kid on fire because she doesn't believe the same as they do? How much worse can you get than that? And also the mental abuse, the religious abuse. This is nothing but a portrait of what to avoid when looking for a lover, especially a lover who presents themselves as being this overall wholesome individual who can make all of your dreams come true. And then when the red flags start to come up, you start to dismiss those because you kind of think to yourself, oh no, he wouldn't do that. He's a good person. No, this is a tale of warning that explains to people, acknowledge the red flag. Although The Dam is subtly written, the subject matter kind of hits a little too close to home, especially in regards to religious abuse. And even though the abuse in this is only mental, except for one scene where it does become physical, mental abuse can be just as devastating as physical. And with the physical moment that happens in this book, I won't elaborate on it because I already did that in the spoiler section. But overall, it paints a really good supernatural portrait of what could happen when an abuser has died and his personality remains in that location, just reverberating off of the walls. And we do get perspectives from multiple sides. We have the perspective of what the abuser left behind. We have the perspective of the victim who has reverted back to her old self and she's regaining everything she's lost. And then we also have the victim's friends who may have even been dismissed from her life due to who she was with. And this is where a lot of the it hits a little too close to home for me, because I have been in one of those circumstances where I was the friend who was standing outside looking in on another friend who was being abused by someone who claimed to be a good Christian man. And so that did strike a little hard. And I think at the same time, with mentioning Francis and Bill here, I could really put myself in their shoes, because now that she's been able to revert back to who she was and break away from Sam because he died, then they feel like they're welcome in her place again. And so that's something that really did touch a nerve for me. If you're wondering how this book is about a residual haunting, it is literally spelled out in the philosophy of the narrator, which at one point he states that the power of thought never dies. And this is shown in two different ways. One is the supernatural sense, and another one is a natural sense. Now, in the supernatural sense, we have the residual haunting, and this is all based at the towers and the property of the towers, where especially inside of the towers, you have like this brooding cloud of negativity that just continues to manifest and build until it gets ready to explode, and then it just pulls back until it's ready to reach a peak again. And the thing is, this is all because of Sam's strong personality and fire and brimstone beliefs, and how just hardcore he was on just being determined people were going to follow his belief system and his religion. And so this all has become nothing but imprinted on the house itself. So we see how the power of belief has affected a building here, and it's in a residual haunting. Now, we also do see how in the natural sense, this power of belief has trickled down to a younger generation who has impressionable minds. And unless the cycle can be broken, this power of belief will continue to live on in other individuals who are younger. And until they see that this is the wrong thing to do, they're just going to be stuck in that, and they're going to teach their children and their children's children. And until the cycle gets broken, Sam's negativity is going to live on in two senses, inside of the house and also through a bloodline of those children that he brainwashed into believing the same way as himself. As I mentioned, I read this book twice, and I'm glad that I did, because the first time I read it, I did enjoy it, but I felt like I missed something. So the second time when I read it, I really focused harder and tried to read it for its multiple levels of context that it provides. And by doing so, I really loved it a great deal more after that, because not only did it kind of present the idea of a gothic ghost story, but it also really packed in some philosophy and a lot of food for thought. And at the end of the day, I really felt like I just had read a sophisticated book. So I really do recommend this title. It was fun to read. And of course, once again, The Damned is in this book. If you would like to get the collection of Algernon Blackwood, you'll have quite a few in this. It's going to be 36 of his works. And this is volume 1, because there's a second volume out there as well. But it is really a thought-provoking story, and I cannot suggest it enough. Now, the thing is, with The Damned, I would not recommend it as a first read if someone has never read Blackwood before. But if you've already read stories of his like The Willows or The Wendigo, then The Damned is definitely a good second or third story read. On to the questions. The first question is, what book would you recommend that is about a residual haunting? The second question is, have you ever experienced a residual haunting? Personally, I think I have. And I never really had experienced this before until I went to Sun Studios in Memphis. And when I had gone into the Sun Studios for the tour, it was really cool to see. It was really awesome to see all the memorabilia. But like the further I went into the studio, the more I was hit with all of these kind of phantom emotions that just felt like they were all around me. And then it just kind of hit me where I was starting to be able to empathize or sympathize with those emotions. And it was this big cloud of negativity, positivity. It felt like this had been a place where people's dreams had come true, where a lot of joy and happiness and good news had been shared. But also at the same time, it felt like this was a place where failures happened, where people had abuse, where people had issues with like drugs or alcohol. And it just feels like there was this big combination of everything that just loaded up together and just hit me all at once. And the thing is, it got to a point where it became so intense, I came close to crying, but I was able to hold back those tears and act macho for a little bit, or as close to macho as I could. So until then, I had never really experienced what I believed was a residual haunting. But I would definitely love to hear what everyone else feels about the subject. I would like to see if anyone has experienced any residual hauntings or if they even believe in them. So feel free to load those up in the comments, as well as your recommendation on other horror books that are based on residual hauntings. Without anything else left to cover, I would like to thank Alicia Graves and Joseph Baylott for contributing to my Patreon page. If you would also like to contribute, just go to the description section of this video and click on Patreon, and for $5 a month, I'll give you a shout out. And this is just so I can get some extra props and maybe some advertising money here. And pretty much with the Patreon money that's come through so far, it's allowed me to be able to buy this backdrop that you see. So thank you, everyone. And if you're unable to donate to Patreon, no sweat. I'm still going to be making these videos. I'm still going to be just having fun here. So it's not crucial that I get any type of funding on Patreon. It's just a little bit of a honeypot that I can dip into from now and then to make the videos a little bit more. But if you would like to connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, those links are in the description section of this video as well. So feel free to hit me up on those platforms. And also, if you're a YouTuber or you love to watch YouTube, be sure to click on the notifications bell for this video and be sure to subscribe to my channel. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I'm going to go on about a 2 weeks hiatus because I'm going to get married next weekend and then I go on my honeymoon. So hopefully I'll see everyone the weekend after Thanksgiving. But until then, I hope everyone has sweet nightmares and I'll see you soon.